My name is Mary Furlong Minkoff. I'm the curator of archaeological collections at James Madison's Montpelier. But I am here today not because my job as an archaeologist, but because of the sort of second hat I wear, which is I am the Montpelier staff member that coordinates our end of the annual Juneteenth celebration, held in partnership with the Orange County African American Historical Society, as well as the Art Center in Orange. So it's my job to kind of work with the community groups and to bring the programs together. We have been celebrating Juneteenth all month long this year. So this is our 4th virtual program this month. And we are so excited because I think one of the things that's really special about this program is it really captures what the in-person Juneteenth feels like. It's music, it's history, it's learning, it's community, and it's conversation, which are all the things that normally happen in person. So I was so excited when I first learned about this project and its connection, and some of the folks that you see here who have created it have been instrumental in helping us celebrate Juneteenth in person over the past couple of years. But before we go into that, I'd like to turn it over to Ellen Wessel, who is one of the board members of the Orange County African American Historical Society.
Good evening. It is such a pleasure to be here representing the mouthful Orange County African American Historical Society. I was honored to join the board right after retiring in 2019 as assistant to the president at James Madison's Montpelier. So my first involvement with our Juneteenth Now three-way partnership of the Historical Society, the Arts Center of Orange, and Montpelier was when I was working there. Horace Scruggs was then a colleague and in charge of coordinating Montpelier's part of the programming, and one of the talented groups she brought in was her dad, Horace Scruggs' Odyssey of the Soul. So this is a bit of a homecoming for me. The mission of the Orange County African American Historical Society is to identify, research, and preserve local African American legacies, lore, and historical sites. To that end, the Society promotes awareness of the accomplishments and contributions of people of African descent as organic and essential components of our community and of our nation at large. As the country now knows, the entire country, Juneteenth marks the anniversary of the day when news of the official proclamation, then quote, "All slaves are free," unquote, finally reached Galveston, Texas in June 1865. Although the Union Army had won the war 2 months earlier, Confederate resistance was still active in the southwest portion of the country. The Orange County African American Historical Society and the Arts Center joined forces about 15 years ago to celebrate Juneteenth at the Volunteer Fire Department fairgrounds, as well as in areas surrounding the Visitor Center in the town of Orange. It became a triumvirate about 6 years ago when Montpelier joined to host the festivities at its magnificent historic site. We believe we were the first to hold a Juneteenth celebration at the home of a US president. COVID-19 didn't stop us last year or this one. Instead, it sparked the move to celebrate for the entire month of June with virtual and this year some in-person events, such as tonight's, with performers, musicians, historical interpreters, and artists. If you haven't already been there, we have a virtual home base, thanks to Mary Minkoff, for all things Orange County Juneteenth. And it's another mouthful of letters, OCAAHS, Juneteenth.org. Or just go to Montpelier's website and you can get it there, and it's easier to spell. Now I'll be quiet and watch the film with you.
Thank you, Ellen. So for our attendees to this program, I'm going to go over a little bit of what the format's going to be. I'm going to introduce our panelists, and then we are going to watch the program. It is about an hour and 4 minutes, an hour and 5 minutes of a film. And then we will have a discussion with our panelists about the making of the film, the local history, and sort of the importance of that work. I'll start by asking them some questions, but we're going to welcome questions from the audience, in which we are ask you to submit either via the chat or the question and answer box. Before we hit play, I'm going to recognize the folks whose faces that you are seeing today and that are joining us. You see Horace Scruggs, who is a choral conductor, composer, and retired music educator who resides in Fluvanna County. He also teaches and lectures on African American history and culture. He is the creator of this film and someone who we have really relied on for quite a long time to help us with our celebration of Juneteenth. You also see Mozell Booker, who is just joining us. You don't quite see her, but you see her symbol there. Mozell is a native of Fluvanna County. She was a retired educator and is presently serving her 13th year as a member of the Fluvanna County Board of Supervisors. And the last face you see here is Hannah Scruggs. As Ellen mentioned, Hannah is, of course, a former employee of Montpelier, but she's accomplished a whole lot more than that. She currently works in the Family History Center for the Smithsonian Institute and has been instrumental in building community relationships and telling the stories of African Americans throughout, particularly Virginia, but throughout the country now with her national platform to work on. And we are really excited to have them all here and to hear from them at the end of the film. Going to ask our panelists to join us back on their videos, so we can chat and have a discussion about the amazing film we just saw. Just one second. You all can turn your videos back on, that would be great.
There we go.
I don't see my co-actually started it.
Well, we hear you, Mozell, so we know you're there.
I know it. You hear me fussing because I can't, it won't come up. It says start your video, but it doesn't like me. So if you can hear me, I think that's all you need. Oh,
Yeah.
I don't see it. It's not coming up.
We can
But
definitely.
if you can hear me.
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay.
So I just want to start with a basic question really for you, Horace, which is what inspired you to make this film?
It's one of those things that adjusting to the COVID rules of not having in-person performances led us to take what we normally do as a ensemble of Odyssey of Soul, which is I usually do a lecture portion of the program, and then Odyssey of Soul, provides music to go along with that lecture. And so because we couldn't do it in person, we decided to videotape the performance. And then instead of me doing all the talking and doing the lecture section, I decided to grab some people I know and put them as some of the commentaries, part of the video. And so it just kind of sprung from out of that. We weren't in the confines of the auditorium there at Carisbrook. So, the whole of Fluvanna became our stage. So that's really how it came to be.
And Mozell, why did you agree to take part in it? How did Horace persuade you to get involved in this project?
He didn't have to persuade me to get involved. I've known Horace Scruggs ever since he was a little boy. I've known his whole family. But I too love history. I do the history of the white and African American churches in Fluvanna County. I have been doing that and gathering information to the leadership group in Fluvanna for 18 years. So I came through a lot of what we talked about in this film. I went to Dunbar School. I went through the Jim Crow era, and so I'm like the traditional person who have seen a lot more than Hannah and more than Horace in my lifetime. I was born in 1941, so I was 1 month and 1 day when Pearl Harbor was bombed. So you can see how many years of experience I have had.
Thank you. Well, and Hannah, yes, you're a person your dad knows, but what made you agree to do this and kind of get behind this project?
Well, it's been really fun to talk to my dad about local and community history. So when I was in high school, I was an intern and a volunteer at the Fluvanna Historical Society, and it was one of my first jobs, I guess, working in history. And I learned a lot about our community and about the surrounding areas. And that really influenced what I ended up doing with my whole life. So it's been a good time. It's been fun and interesting to be able to have more conversations with my dad about the things that I've learned over the past several years, and to connect about that part of our history and about that part of our community's history. So I was really honored when my dad asked me to be a part of the video and the documentary process, and excited we're doing another video and documentary here over the next year. And so it's just really fun, and it's really special to be able to do those things together.
One of the things that I think is also really neat about this project is the intergenerational of a small community. Where Montpelier is located in Orange County, just not too far away from Fluvanna, just a few miles away, and very much has that, small community, everybody knows each other kind of feeling to it. So I was hoping that you all could maybe, we'll start with you, Hannah, and kind of go in reverse order, speak to sort of that intergenerational component of this experience and of having people, as Mozell mentioned, she was born in 1941. Going to venture to say you both were born a little later, but what that experience was like, experiencing your hometown, your home county through the eyes of other generations.
Yeah, so I grew up, so I am 30, I was born in 1990. And when I was going through school, Fluvanna was experiencing massive growth. For a while, when I was in elementary school and middle school, we were the second fastest growing county in the state, outside of Loudoun County. So we went from classes of 100, 150 people to like almost 300 over the course of like a decade or so. And my class at the time was like one of the biggest that had ever gone through the school. And so it was going, I think Fluvanna still is a community that is where a lot of people know each other. It's hard to go anywhere without seeing someone that you know. But it was definitely in a state of flux. And a lot of people that I went to school with are not from the area, right? They moved to Fluvanna when their parents got jobs in Charlottesville or in Richmond. And I've met more people, or I've come to learn, talking to friends as we get older about more of our family histories and understanding the ways that some of my friends are connected to the county. but often their parents went away and were part of sort of an influx of people coming back in. So that is, it was a really specific time in the county, and I think shapes the way the county looks now. Fluvanna is geographically quite small, but it does have 25,000 people. Is that right, Mozell? Is that a
Yes, about 26,000.
yeah, about
Mhm.
yeah, so it's actually quite populous. So
26.
yeah, and that is a huge amount of growth, even from the time when I was small. They built the first Food Lion. There's E.W. Thomas grocery store that's still a local community store, but the Food Lion was built when I was 5. So that says a lot. I definitely came of age when the county was undergoing major transition. And
Mozell, I'll go to you. What was your experience like working on sort of an intergenerational project and also growing up in Fluvanna?
I had a very happy childhood. My father worked in the school system later on. You know, he drove a school bus. He also he and another friend ran something like a cafeteria at the S.C. Abrams High School. That was the African-American high school in Fluvanna County. Our life was basically around friends. We had a community where we could walk and see each other and play together, but church was the center of everything. My mother did domestic work. She walked to work through the fields across the creek to go to Fork Union to work. I was the youngest of 5 children until my brother was born 10 years later after me. So my oldest sister basically took care of our hair. We had plenty, we had gardens. My father had beautiful gardens, tomatoes, everything we needed. And my mother would can the vegetables and the fruits, and that is what sustained us. We had pigs that we would slaughter during November. So we had meat, we had smokehouses, we had chickens on the yard. So whenever we had a big affair, Mom and Dad could go out and we would have fresh chicken. So we walked a long distance to catch the school bus, but my school days were good. I had a good time growing up. I didn't understand a lot of the things that was going on, the segregation and etc. When we went to Dunbar, it was a nice day. Every Rosenwald school had a flagpole outside. We would stand around the flagpole and we said the Pledge of Allegiance. We also sung a patriotic song. We didn't know at that time that our family was considered second class. We didn't know all that, the Jim Crow and all of the other things that went along with it. I think our parents worked really hard not to burden us with those things. And I think we kind of knew our place. We'd almost accepted where we were, but I knew I could progress because I ended up, a lot of us in that community ended up going to college, getting doctorate degrees. In the summertime, they would go to New York, to Columbia University to get masters. The teachers that taught me at Dunbar, they had gotten their degree from New York City. Mr. Ware and his wife, they were well educated. So it was good. And And we used to do oratorical contests. We would memorize speeches. We wrote patriotic speeches. We did contests. We went to universities and did one-act plays when I was in high school. I mean, it was good.
Excellent, thank you. And Horace, you are falling somewhere between the Food Lion and the smokehouses. So can you share a little bit about your experience and why you really wanted to kind of reach across the generations to tell this story?
Well, I guess I'm the only person in my family. I'm the youngest of 9, and I'm the only person in my family that went all the way through integrated school. So I started school in 1969, first year of integration in Virginia. And I think, listening to Mozell, it's interesting because I was very much aware of, as I got through middle and high school, I was very much aware of, the racial divide that was going on in our society. In Fluvanna, it wasn't a big deal because I think we all did, folks did get along, so to speak, but you understood the kind of the racial, I'm just looking for the word here, complexities, that's what I'm looking for, the racial complexities of American society. I was probably one of just a handful of African Americans who went to college out of my graduating class of about 135 people. Fluvanna County schools were about 25% African American. And so with Mozell and some of my older sisters, that was definitely a understanding that education was, your way out, your way to. You had lots of people who were representing that in your life: pastors, teachers, community members, community leaders. But when I was coming through, kind of the thought of the African American was one of was definitely a second class citizen, or even to the point of being a problem for America. And so me going off, I went to Longwood, a predominantly white school, but still, and even there, really understanding that was something to being an African American in this society. And so I think that really kind of kept me really keen to racial injustices, just kind of the way America sees race.
Thank you. I actually want to go to a question we have from the audience, and there's a couple more popping up. The first question comes from Sharon Montgomery, and she's asking about if any of the panelists have any thoughts or comments about the news that recently came out about the relationship between the Montpelier Foundation and the Montpelier Descendant Committee's collaboration moving forward towards parity. And I know that's not directly relating to the film, but I know at least one of our panelists has been involved in this process. So Hannah, if you wanted to take a few minutes maybe to answer Sharon's question.
Yeah, I am really excited about the Montpelier Foundation and the Montpelier Descendants Committee becoming co-stewards of Montpelier. I think that's a huge step. I was originally, or formerly, I guess, the coordinator of the descendant community at Montpelier from the Montpelier side. And so I've gotten definitely a front row seat to the whole process, and it hasn't come easily. And I am just extremely, I'm really, really happy to see this happening finally, because we've been working for it for a long time, and it's really great. And I'm hoping that it will also impact other plantation sites and museums throughout the country, as well as other sites of slavery. So plantation museums aren't the only place where enslaved people, worked and were enslaved. UVA's descendant community is another, universities in general are a place where I would really like to see something like this happen. So I think it's really a big step in the right direction towards restorative justice.
Excellent. Thank you. We actually have another question from the audience. And Carolyn's asking about, the interviewing and recording of oral histories, specifically, and if the Fluvanna Historical Society is interviewing community members about their life experience and histories. And I think this would also be a great time to touch on sort of the importance of local history and how that plays into that. So I'm not sure who the best person to answer that is, so.
Well, I can answer that. I'm working with Trish Johnson, who is our Historical Society person here in Fluvanna County. And since the documentary that came out in February, we have interviewed, I would say about 4 or 5 people in the county. Most of them, in their 70s, some of them a good deal older than that. And so that's one of the things that I know that she's working on quite diligently, to just, we'd set up a camera and just let people talk. We may have a couple of leading questions, but I think that's very important to get those stories that are being lost to us, obviously. But I think they're important in connecting with the local history. And I think, again, you asked about that.
Yeah.
Oh, so we asked about that. And so I think, yeah, local history is very important, because I think sometimes when we look at sites like Monticello and Montpelier, we look at those as historical sites, and it's a wonderful thing that they are leading the charge in getting the descendants community access and their place. But that still does have to kind of push down into our local communities as well.
Mozell, did you want to add?
Years ago, can I add to that, Mary? Years ago, when I think when we first started the history information with Dunbar School, we received, the Historical Society got a grant for us to do oral history. So we do have history, a lot of CDs with individuals that are not even here with us today. I even had the opportunity to go to Richmond and interview the principal that was my principal, a lead teacher at Dunbar School. He was 87 years old. So I have that on tape. But we still need more. We do not have a good history on when we integrated. And those young people are living, a lot of them are living today that integrated at the high school in 1969. And I've been saying, and Trish has been saying to other people, that we need to get those people together in a room, not only the African-American students, but we need to get all of the students who went to Caresburg High School during that time and pull some of that information together. I think that's really lacking. That's a part that we just don't have.
One of the other questions, sort of building on a question that's coming from the audience, but also something I was really curious about is, can you share sort of elaborate on the importance of the role of churches in the community, both in sort of supporting the community, but also as the keepers of local history in so many ways? Mozell, I'll start maybe with you to talk with that, and then move around the panel a little bit.
Yeah, well, right. Every school, and I'm talking about African-American schools, the one-room schools, the Rosenwald schools, they were built in the community where the churches were. It's like they were partners. The church was a place where it was a socializing. I mean, it was a place where you saw your friends. You had good programs, you had good food. Everything was at the church. It was a happy place to be. I know a lot of people say, their parents made them go to church, and then well, I don't know. I guess I just went to church just to see my friends, and we would sing in the choir. So the church probably had more, maybe, I don't know, somebody may say that's wrong, more of an influence back then than I think that they have now, because we have too many other things to do, too many other places to go. So I don't know if that answered it or not, and I know Horace can probably add to it, and Hannah. Yeah.
Certainly. We have to remember that the church was probably the first autonomous entity that African Americans had control of. And I use that word control very loosely, but they were allowed, the enslaved populations were allowed to gather as long as a white man was there, a white person was there. They were allowed to gather and have church even during enslavement. So churches easily translated to the center of African American society during Reconstruction and in the years following. So church, faith were a part of that, part of the African American community. And I would say, as conflicted as it was, you were getting, the Africans who were coming to America were getting this religion from our enslavers. And I'm sure that was conflicting. And a lot of, especially during I would say the 70s and 80s, there were a lot of African Americans who left the church because of that conflict. And so, it is a conflicted kind of part of our African American society, but nonetheless, it is a great way that it sustained American society through the years.
Hannah, do you want to add?
Yeah, I think that as both my dad and Mozell said, it can't be the function of church can't be overstated in Black communities, especially in the South, but also in the North as well, and in other places, because it wasn't just about religion, right? It was about socializing, it was about education, it was about passing on tradition. And there are things that are part of African American Christianity that we would call syncretic, right? That do have influences from West Africa and West African spiritualities, like different rituals, singing, like the types of songs and spirituals that were developed. And that is really important to remember too, that enslaved people didn't just adopt the religion of their enslavers. Similarly to, as my dad was saying, people do feel a conflict there, but also in the Black church, there's always been, and I think an understanding too that this was bigger in some ways than that, and that it also could carry the traditions of Christianity, was able to carry the traditions of their ancestors as well. Yeah, I think, and it also, churches and places like this, right, were also a place where people could organize to revolt, to have power. Nat Turner was a minister. He had his Bible with him when he, was going in the Nat Turner's rebellion, right? He had his Bible, which we have at the Smithsonian now. So that it wasn't just something that placated enslaved people, it was a source of power, and a source of understanding of who they were, like from their past, and who they were, not as descendants of people from West Africa, but also as descendants of people from West Africa who are now living in the Americas, who are now living somewhere else and forming their own culture.
Well, you some of you touched on a little bit the music coming through in the church, and I think one of the things that is so unique about this film, and one of the reasons I think it sort of captured sort of, for me, what we talk about with Juneteenth so well, is that combination of music, art, performance with history and with learning. So I'm going to start with you, Horace, and then we can go around if folks want to add. But you're a music educator, so what is the role of music in teaching people about the past?
Wow. So I think for African Americans, I've said this in a lecture before. I believe that music was literacy. It was the way that things were passed down. It was the way that things were remembered. So as a enslaved person, you did not know how to read or write, but how did you remember? Well, you sang it. and I say that's why spirituals are so repetitive, because they drive home the message that needs to be learned. But also we know that spirituals were encoded as well. We know that Follow the Drinking Gourd was a way of remembering how to get to the Underground Railroad and how to get to North. Got to get to the North. So we know that music really does stay in our hearts and our minds much easier than if I were just to memorize it. So I believe that the spirituals were a way of literacy. But then, as Hannah touched on very nicely, it was a vessel for the traditions. It was a vessel for the things that we wanted to remember beyond just celebration, but it was a vessel for our religious beliefs, our family beliefs. And that's one thing that kind of goes back to religion. In non-Western religious societies, religion tends to be an everyday event. It's something that you do while you're working in the field or cooking around the fire or raising your children. Celebration and singing is all a part, intertwined in your daily life. And I think that's one of the things that the West African tradition came shining through in the African American church and the African American community, because religion became something beyond just something you did on Sunday. And music was certainly a part of that.
Thank you. I'm going to make a quick plug before.
The other thing that I would add, other thing I will add, I learned to read a lot by using the hymnals, standing by, so I learned how to read. But the other thing about music, we had people who played the guitar, we had people who played drums and the piano, and they didn't have any musical lessons. They played by ear. They picked it up. They were gifted, and they just played music. So, and right now, we have a lot of people in our churches that play the piano beautifully. And it's a puzzle to me. But Horace, do you play by ear or you play only by music notes, or you do both?
I'm a child of both my teachings. So I know how to play by ear and by rote. So.
Wonderful.
I want to make
I thought you'd have that answer.
a quick plug, particularly for those that are interested in listening to more spirituals. Last week, we did a virtual concert with Calvin Earl, who has made it his life's mission to get African American spirituals recorded. And that video is available and online now. You can go to the OCAHS Juneteenth website or YouTube and find it there. And it's great music, and he takes us through time, much like the performers in Odyssey of Soul do through the documentary. And this isn't really a question, but we have a wonderful comment from the audience about how much they've learned so far in this program and how beautiful everyone's voices were singing. But I do want to ask you all a question. You know, we've included this program and this screening as part of a month-long celebration of Juneteenth. And it just so happened that this year, Juneteenth became a federal holiday. So, you know, I would just love for you all to kind of touch on how you see work like this fitting into this, I won't say a new holiday, but a new to a lot of people holiday, and one that I think we're gonna all be trying to figure out how do we celebrate and recognize. So Hannah, I'm actually gonna go to you first and let you go, and then we'll go around the circle.
Yeah, I think that local history is really crucial to understanding the past and African American history. Juneteenth, like you said earlier, is commemorating the day when enslaved people in Galveston, Texas finally heard the good news of the Emancipation Proclamation. But throughout the country, people have different Emancipation Days, and different communities have different Emancipation Days. I know in Charlottesville, they celebrate Liberation Day on, I think, April 3rd, or it's end of March. And they've started celebrating that. And I think that's a citywide holiday now. They replaced Thomas Jefferson's birthday with Liberation Day. And when Juneteenth became a holiday, some of our family members were texting about how they remember some of our ancestors far back being in Pennsylvania and celebrating an Emancipation Day in September. So it really depends on sort of historically where your family is from, where you celebrate Emancipation Day. And so I hope that Juneteenth gives people an opportunity to turn towards their local history and communities and their own family traditions, and to learn more about where their families are from and the traditions that they may have celebrated and the ways that their family marked the end of slavery.
I think that's a brilliant idea. I know April 3rd was Richmond when they would celebrate, because that was the fall of Richmond. So thinking about those days specific to Virginia, I think is really exciting for those of us who live here. Horace, would you like to sort of expand on any of that or share any thoughts?
I think probably the one thing that I see is that, you know, now African American history is not locked into 1 month in the middle of winter. You know, we now are talking about African American history, American history with Africans included, however you ever want to put it. That now we're kind of gotten rid of the walls of that African American History Month is the only time we talk about it, and then the rest of the years it just, you know, we kind of go on about it as if it never existed. So I think that's a major step in the direction, and a major wall that's come down, that we can kind of talk about African American history and African Americans and their contributions to this country as Americans beyond a certain time of the year.
I think that's great. Mozell, do you have anything you'd like to add?
Well, I guess I started attending Juneteenth celebrations in Charlottesville. I think I went to the first one. They'd had it at Piedmont Community College, and they've been doing this for 20 years. And I participated in a great number of them. And I'm just looking forward for Fluvanna to do something next year, to start working on. Horace, Hannah, we need to be thinking about this, because this year we didn't do anything. We said we were going to go other places, but we need to do something in Fluvanna. So that's my hope.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's a great hope, because I think it reminds us all so much information and traditions are in our own backyards. So looking locally, talking to family members, talking to neighbors, and finding the histories of our own communities and celebrating those histories and sharing them, I think will help us all, you know, be better neighbors to each other, be better communities. And as Hannah, you were talking about in the video, that so many of us don't understand our history. We don't understand the past of this country. And we think about national history, but so many of us don't understand the past of our own communities. And I think this is a really great example of folks coming together to share their community history and to teach, you know, so many of us. There's going to be a lot of people not from Fluvanna and not even from Virginia that are watching this or may watch it later. And maybe they'll get inspired to kind of, you know, talk to their own neighbors, look at their own historical society, and gather the information. We're getting to the end, but I just wanted to offer if anyone had any closing words for this evening, any kind of pieces of wisdom you'd like to impart on the audience. And I'm going to start with you, Mozell, and then I'm going to go to Hannah, and Horace, I'm going to let you wrap us up at the end. So Mozell, any final words?
Well, I would just like to thank you for this opportunity to have this program and to talk about things that maybe I didn't get to say in the documentary. And there's still so many stories and so many other things that I would like the opportunity to share. And I'm so happy that Horace is doing these documentaries, because now I hope that I can talk a little bit more about other experiences, you know, that I have had in the school system in Fluvanna and Charlottesville, with different individuals. I want to be able to do that before I get to be a super senior and I can't remember those things, or they're fresh in my mind. So Horace, don't wait until I'm gonna be 80 in November. So don't wait until I'm 85 to come interview me. I want to tell you all I know now. Okay. Thank you so much for this opportunity.
Well, thank you so much for being willing to take part in it. All right, Hannah, any sort of parting words or wisdom?
Yeah, I think similarly to Mozell, it is so important to talk to the people who hold memory in your communities, and to learn more about where you are. I've lived in several different places now, and I found it deeply impactful and very important to understanding where I was, like even geographically understanding where I was to understand the history of the place where I'm living at the time. So I think no matter where you are, if it's a place where you grew up or if it's a place where you are only lived for 1 week, find out more about where you are and look to the people in your communities who do hold the memory and hold the wisdom. And yeah, thank you for the opportunity also.
Thank you. Power of place. I'm very into it as an archaeologist. All right, Horace, bring us home.
Again, thank you, as everybody else said, thank you for having us and showing the documentary. I'd like to share one little thing. When I was in a discussion about the documentary with the group of the Arts Council, and in the documentary we talk about the one lynching that happened in Fluvanna County, and as it says in the documentary, those buttresses and all of that infrastructure, if you will, is still in view. And one lady says that she can no longer drive across the Rivanna River and not think of William Young. And I thought that was a powerful thing, because I think that's what, when it comes to local history, that's what we're really trying to do, is we're trying to say, in this place that you drive past every day, something happened, something historical happened, something that changed the trajectory of someone's life, or maybe even our whole county. And I think that that's the thing that inspired me when I think about our county, there's so many places, just like a little slave chapel. When I walked into that building to film the choir, Odyssey of Soul, I was in there by myself for a while, and I looked at those boards and I thought my ancestors could have, and probably did, either walked upon those boards, sung on top of those boards, maybe shaved them so they could fit into that floor. And so I think those are the things that local history does for us. It makes us want to recognize our local history, but also, more importantly, push our localities to change the places that they need to be changed. And so I can look at things on a national level, but be very removed because my local level remains the same. But once I kind of dig into my local history, I think I begin to say, wow, we need to change that. Oh, that needs to come down, or we need to put that up, or somebody needs to know about this. And so that's what's really, my parting shot about working and talking about local history. But again, thank you for having us.
Thank you so much all for joining us, for sharing your personal stories, but also your thoughts about these things. I feel really inspired right now to think about my community in a different way. And I think one of the beautiful things about local history and local change is, yes, you get to see it every day, and there's a whole lot less steps to get to the decision makers in your community than there are to get, to the national level. And so, getting to your local elected officials, getting to your local school boards, getting to your local churches, your local historical societies and museums, parks, all of those places, I think is both powerful and obtainable, which is kind of the best kind of goal, right? So I just want to thank you again so much for your time, for sharing this documentary with us. For those of you guys who have been watching, we are going to put the panel discussion recording online, not with the whole documentary, but the trailer is online, so you can share it with your friends. And if they really want to see it, they can get in touch with Horace and find a way to do another screening. And I also want to say, mark your calendars for next year's Juneteenth, because we are going to be celebrating again, both virtually, but also in person, hopefully with quite a big bang. So be nice to hear everyone singing live and in person and telling stories there. Mozell, I know you're angling for one in Fluvanna, but if it doesn't happen, come over to Orange. We would love to have you. Well, thank you everyone, and thank you everyone for joining us, and have a lovely evening.
All right, thank you.
Bye, thank you.
Hey, thank you. Thank you.
All right, see y'all later.
Yes.